And obviously Ian is the epitome of someone who has grown up under that shadow and basically has become a man. And it's what kind of man he's become because of his past.
I'd already made a film with David Harewood about his psychosis. And so I was kind of thinking of high profile people to talk about interesting sort of subjects that aren't really talked about much. And I thought, wow, Ian Wright, I didn't know that. So we approached him and his management company and started a conversation. And we pitched it to the BBC, and they took quite a long time to decide to do it. And in the end, it got commissioned just as lockdown happened.
I think basically right at the start when we first met, I think we all felt very strongly that we wanted the tone to kind of like reflect, to be raw and very honest, and to reflect who Ian was and his humor. And also once we started the research process, looking at all the people who have experienced domestic abuse as well, there were incredible kind of like stories of resilience and courage. And we just felt that that was, although it's quite a dark subject and people go through a lot of pain, there is a way through it. I think we all felt through this process that that's one of the things that we wanted to represent, to show the true palette of Ian and the people who experienced and who were brave enough to talk to us. And actually, when we were making the programme, there was a big domestic abuse bill, which I think has just gone through Parliament, where they were trying to change the definition of a domestic abuse, because it was only until quite recently that children were acknowledged as victims of domestic abuse. Before, it was just kind of like, oh, they're in another room, they're not going to be affected. And obviously Ian is the epitome of someone who has grown up under that shadow and basically has become a man. And it's what kind of man he's become because of his past.
Well, I think, intimacy with your subject is really, really important. And the shooting that me and Charlene were kind of taking part in was kind of trying to push towards that in general in everything that we did. More importantly was kind of like developing a relationship with Ian and our contributors. And then that allows the shooting of kind of being closer, and everything follows in from that kind of point of view. You mentioned about locations. So, like his home is obviously a huge sanctuary for him, but then also other locations where you take him back to his house, the house in the first scene, or the bench where him and his brother sat on and played football nearby and things like that. So I tried to make sure, or me and Charlene tried to make sure that that everything had a reason to be and would be significant to Ian in terms of that. I mean, you're totally right. Yeah, it's a very delicate line, and there's a lot of chat that went on with his family, people around him, his friends that we did a lot of work with, and we're talking about it, and everything feeds into Ian in that way, to know that we're trying to do things in the most responsible way, that we are people who are empathizing and trying to really understand his situation, and very slowly you kind of build that relationship because you're going through things with him. There's something to be said with films like this, that people are reliving some of these things, but making them go through that experience opens them up a lot more to what we all want to see, which is the vulnerability, because that makes you understand what that person's going through, and that that's very difficult. Ian had, like most people, like any normal person would, quite a lot of shields up, quite a lot of protection around them. But I think once, Charlene and kind of showed that we are people who can be trusted, then with his whole circle of friends and family, then I think that's when we got to the better scenes, and that's the stuff that's in the program. But also in terms of the development of the relationship with Ian, that would involve, me going round to his house, and I always came round with a camera, even though I would not necessarily be planning to use it, because fundamentally I wanted him to understand that I wanted to try and capture something real rather than something fake.
Getting the trust and finding the individuals that Ian ends up meeting, and I took a real personal responsibility in finding not only the individuals that he would meet, but ensuring that they felt safe and that they felt like they could contribute meaningfully to the project. And that was difficult. I mean, you know, domestic abuse doesn't have a start and a stop for many people. It's an ongoing trauma. And so then when you add, you know, potentially filming someone unveiling parts of themselves to a camera for the world to see, that's a different level or layer of discussion, of duty of care, of honesty and openness, really. I think, you know, between me and Dan personally, we really wanted to make a film that felt fresh. There are lots of instances of programs that have delved to some extent into domestic violence, domestic abuse. And me and Dan were constantly questioning, who can Ian meet? What can we say that feels new, tangible, fresh, and profound? And I think a part of that really laid the foundation of my casting process and how I dealt with the individuals that are in the program. Firstly, nuance, who are telling these stories? Wes, who is in the program, is someone who has who was an abuser, who perpetrated domestic abuse. And, you know, me and Dan were very aware that including a perpetrator of abuse could be seen by some people as excusing the actions of someone who's done something horrible like that. But we felt that it was pivotal and necessary to ensure that that was part of the wider discussion around domestic abuse, and that it emphasized and highlighted the cyclic nature of domestic abuse, which is what Ian's story effectively comes down to. You know, I mean, likewise, someone like Naomi, for me personally, as a producer, it was very important that we had inclusive storytelling. And Naomi, being a Black woman, speaking about her experience of domestic abuse was, for me, really, really important personally. Not only in humanizing her and humanizing the Black female experience and traumas like that, but also for visibility. So, logistics as a producer is really important, budget's really important, but for me, fundamentally, it comes down to, are you creating an environment where the contributors that you work with can trust you? Are you, as a producer, doing your best to ensure meaningful relationships with the charities and organizations that you're working with? Because ultimately, I don't believe as a producer, a brilliant documentary like this can be made without the help of organizations like, you know, the Hampton Trust or the NSPCC, who are so pivotal in providing us with great information, but also people who are willing to come forward and share their story.
The main thing is watch as much as you can in the genre that you're interested in. Gather as much information as you can about storytelling, about music, and also if you're kind of new to editing, is try and get in a dub or something and find out what works, what doesn't work, what the dub can do, and online, all of those things. Just find out what everybody's job is.
I think as a producer and thinking about people, I think people are very much at the heart of great stories and great storytelling. And something that I've learned along my journey is finding people who can speak to the shade of humanity, the shades, the different shades, the light and the dark, the funny and the not so funny, and who communicate that in their own really special way.
So I would say it's one of the key things is staying true to the story. Remember what it exactly is that you started out trying to do, because there will be many distractions.
But what am I looking for in terms of editors is just, you know, it's a really intimate relationship, you know, editor and director. And I think being able to be frank and honest about, you know, and vulnerable in front of your editor is really, really important, because it gets you over that first hump of, you know, like Alex said, he's the first viewer of the material in a lot of ways. And so he can be, if you allow him to be, he can be really tough with, you know, about the material, but that gets you to a certain place faster. and it allows you to make the best film in the time that you're allotted.